Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy-to-use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG Sealed and Singles will be 5% off. Known for their awesome sleeves and deck boxes, did you know that Dragon Shield also has an app? It's true, they've got MTG Card Manager. Using your phone, you can scan your collection in any language, and get real-time information on the language and price of the card. There's even a handy deck building feature allowing you to put that collection into decks, so you know where each card is. You can find MTG Card Manager out now in any applicable app store. Today's patron shoutout goes to Coral. Thanks Coral for supporting me through Patreon. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game has Arja, Max, John, and Matt joining me, with Arja playing Breena and keeps Esper Sentinel, 2 Planes, Stroke of Midnight, Dust Legion Duelist, Glimmerlens, and Command Tower. John is playing Sliver Overlord, keeping Stomping Ground, Taunting Sliver, Gemhide Sliver, Regal Sliver, Woodland Cemetery, Cavern of Souls, and City of Brass. Mathieu is playing his Doric deck, keeping 3 Forests, Monster Manual, Baru Fist of Krosa, Sylvan Anthem, and Renata Called to the Hunt. And last but not least, we have Max playing Wildsear, keeping Virtue of Courage, Dryad of the Ilsean Grove, Sediston Champion, Crashing Footfalls, Myriad Landscape, and 2 Forests. Arja wins the die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Command Tower, tapping it for an Esper Sentinel. Max plays a Forest for turn and suspends a Crashing Footfalls. John draws and just plays a tap Stomping Ground. Mathieu's got a Forest and passes back to Arja. Arja's turn has him drawing, playing a Plains in his main phase, and then casting Dusk Legion Duelist. Going to combat, he pokes Max for 1 with a Sentinel and passes. Max removes a Suspend counter, draws for turn, and then plays a tap Myriad Landscape before passing. John's land for turn is a Cavern of Souls, naming Sliver, and he then casts an uncounterable Gemhide Sliver, and after that, passes. Mathieu draws, plays a Forest, and casts Sylvan Anthem. He passes to Arja after that. Arja's got a Plains for turn, and then brings out Breena. Going to combat, he swings the Dusk Legion Duelist at John and the Esper Sentinel at Matt. This is Arja putting 2+1/+1 counters onto both of his attackers, and draws a total of 3 cards between the abilities. John and Matt then take the hits. With nothing else, Arja moves to his end step and discards down to 7. Max down takes the Crashing Footfalls, draws, and plays a Forest. He then pays 2 to crack the Myriad Landscape, going to find 2 mountains, and passing. John's got a Woodland Cemetery for turn, and he then casts a Cloud Shredder Sliver. 1 good Sliver deserves another, and a Talon Sliver joins the team. He then goes to combat. He swings the Cloud Shredder Sliver at Mathieu, and the Talon Sliver go at Max, which has John drawing a card, while Arja puts 2+1/+1 counters onto his Duelist from the Breena trigger, which also draws him a card. Matt and Max then take their damage, and John then passes turn. Matt draws and plays a Forest. He then casts Zoological Study, milling 5, and puts to hand Nylea Keen-Eyed, and then passes to Arja. Arja draws and plays a Swamp. He then casts Curse of Silence, naming Sliver Overlord. He follows that up by casting Jailbreak, and he and Max get back lands, and he then moves to combat. He swings the Esper Sentinel at Mathieu, Breena at John, and the Duelist at Max. He gets to put the Breena trigger on itself, and no one blocks, taking the hit. With nothing else, Arja passes. Max has a Forest for turn, and he casts a Wolf Willow Haven on an untapped Forest, and Arja draws a card. He then casts Wildsear and passes. John's turn has him playing a Sunpetal Grove, and he then casts a Taunting Sliver. As it comes in, he goads Breena with it, and he then taps his slivers to help cast a Regal Sliver, once more getting a goad trigger, and this time targets the Dust Legion Duelist. John also becomes the Monarch, and he then moves to combat. He swings the Regal Sliver at Max to draw a card from the Breena trigger, and Arja gets to pump up his Esper Sentinel. John then passes through his phases, drawing a card at the end of turn from being the Monarch. Mathieu's got a Plaza of Heroes for turn, and then casts Doric. He gets to go and find a forest as she enters, and then scries off the Sylvan Anthem. He then passes, and during his end step, Arja casts Path to Exile and targets John's Gemhide Sliver, and John gets to go and find a basic as we move to Arja's turn. Arja draws and plays a Caves of Koilos, and he then goes to combat. He swings the Esper Sentinel at John, the Dust Legion Duelist at Matt, and Breena goes at Max. Arja loads up the Esper Sentinel with Breena's triggers, and then draws 2. We then move to blocks, and Matt chumps with Doric while everyone else takes their hits. In his post-combat main phase, Arja then casts Case of the Stashed Skeleton, and then a Keen Duelist, drawing from being the Monarch and passing. Max removes the last suspend counter from Crashing Footfalls, casting it and getting 2 4/4 Rhino tokens. He doesn't pay for the Esper Sentinel trigger, so Arja gets to draw, and then Max draws as he moves to his draw step. Max then plays a Steadison Champion, and follows it up by casting Cindervines. This cascades him into a Guy's Will, which he chooses not to cast. Max does get to grow the champion, and draws a card from the enchantment entering. He then moves to combat. He swings his commander at Arja, dealing 6, and Max then gets to move to his end step, drawing from having stolen the Monarchy, and passing to John. John plays an untapped Blood Crypt for turn, taking 2. He then casts a Gale Rider Sliver, which has Arja responding by casting Vanishing Verse and targeting Regal Sliver. The Gale Rider Sliver then enters, goading Breena, and John follows up with a Bone-Size Sliver, goading the Esper Sentinel as it comes in. Going to combat, John then swings the Gale Rider Sliver at Max, stealing the Monarchy, and draws during his end step as he passes to Matt. Matt's got a Forest return, and then just casts Monster Manual, and he passes to Arja. Arja's upkeep has him getting a Keen Duelist trigger, and he picks Matt with it. Arja reveals Elish Norngran and Cenobite off top, and Max reveals a Crop Rotation. This has Arja taking 1 and Matt taking 7. Arja then draws her turn, and plays a Swamp, and then casts Elish Norn. With it on the stack, Max responds by casting Embereth Blaze and targets the Keen Duelist, and Norn then comes in and wipes away most of John's board. Going to combat, Arja swings everything at John to take him out. This has Arja getting to draw a card off of Breena trigger itself, and then John dies even with blocks. With nothing else, Arja passes. Max draws and plays Rhythm of the Wild, cascading into Fertile Ground, and Arja gets a draw from the Esper Sentinel. He then casts a Rasta, and cascades into a Destiny Spinner, both of which enter with a +1/+1 counter thanks to Riot. Going to combat, Max then swings it at Arja, and Arja blocks Wildsear with the Dust Legion Duelist and takes the rest. Max then takes the Monarchy and moves to his end step, drawing a card, and passes. Also during his end step, Mathieu activates the Monster Manual, putting Nylea into play, and he moves to his turn. Mathieu draws, plays a Forest, and just casts Renata. Arja's turn has him drawing and playing a tapped Orzhov Guildgate. He then casts Shouldered. Max and Matt each sacrifice a non-token creature, and Arja then moves to combat. He swings the Skeleton at Matt, and the rest go at Max. Before moving to blocks, Max activates Cindervines to destroy the Esper Sentinel, and he then blocks Breena with a Rasta and lives. Mathieu also uses the Monster Manual to put Baru into play, and then casts Crop Rotation. With the spell in the stack, Arja responds by casting Dark Ritual, and then uses the mana to play Stroke of Midnight and targets Baru. This takes it out, so Matt won't get the pump as he goes into his library, and he finds Adventurer's Guildhall and puts it into play. Everyone then takes their damage, and with nothing else, Arja passes to his end step, drawing from being the Monarch. Max draws and plays a Wild Growth, and then casts a Tally Primal Conqueror. Max gets a Burning Earth from himself, Giver of Runes from Arja, and Jamie McCrimmon off of Matt. And with the spell still in exile, he floats 3 mana before casting Burning Earth. He then uses that mana to help cast Fight Rigging, and he then goes to combat. He puts a +1/+1 counter onto a Rhino token, which then lets him cast Lignify from Fight Rigging, and he puts it onto Elesh Norn. Max then swings everything in Arja, and Arja blocks 2 Rhinos with a Duelist and Sheoldred, but still takes 18. Max then becomes the Monarch and passes. Mechu's got a Forest return, and he recasts Doric again. He goes to find a forest, and then goes to combat. He swings Nylea at Arja, who's forced to jump with a Dust Legion Duelist. With nothing else, Matt passes. Arja draws and flips Sheoldred into the True Conscriptures, killing Jamie and Doric. He then goes to combat, and swings the Lignified Elesh Norn at Matt and the rest at Max. Mechu uses a monster manual to put God Eternal Ronus into play, and he blocks Elesh Norn, but Max can't block and still takes lethal. After combat, Arja then plays a Swamp for turn. He then casts Soul Ring, and once that's done, casts Entomb and goes to find a White Plume Adventurer. It goes into his graveyard, which he then brings back by casting Unearth. This gives Arja the initiative, and he goes into his library again, finding a basic. Arja then wraps things up with a Mother of Runes, and passes after that. Mechu draws, and Arja gets to untap Breena on his upkeep. Mechu then plays a Forest return, and he casts Harmonize, drawing 3 more cards. Going to combat, he swings both of his creatures at Arja, but Arja blocks the White Plume Adventurer on Ronus, and Breena on Nylea. The White Plume dies, and in his post-combat main phase, Mechu plays Azusa, Lost But Seeking. He then plays 2 more forests for his land drops, and passes. Arja scries from the Undercity on his upkeep, and then draws. He then moves further into the True Scriptures, making Mechu discard 3 and mill 3, and Arja then plays a Swamp for turn. He then casts a Predator's Hour, and he goes to combat. He swings a Skeleton at Mechu, and Mechu activates Nylea in response. This has him revealing a Nature's Claim, which he puts into the graveyard. And Arja then deals 4, and exiles Matt's top card. In his post-combat main phase, Arja then casts a Smuggler's Share, and then draws from being the Monarch as he passes turn. Mechu draws and activates Nylea, putting a Forest into the graveyard. He then activates Nylea 2 more times, bidding a Forest, and then search for Tomorrow. Going to combat, he swings everything at Arja. Arja blocks Nylea and Ronus with Breena and Mother of Ruins, and then activates the Mother of Ruins to give herself protection from green. Arja only takes a total of 2, and Matt then passes turn. Arja makes a treasure from the Undercity, draws, and then adds the final lore counter to the True Scriptures. This reanimates all of his creatures, and with the Elesh Norn buff, Arja easily has lethal and is able to take the game through combat. Game review time. Today's game was about 48 minutes and 52 seconds, and I think Arja just blasted out of the gate and did not stop. That early turn Esper Sentinel followed by the Keen Duelist just gave him so much card advantage. Even the Dust Legion was just really powerful. Breena is that kind of deck where there's an offer that tempts your opponents into getting it. In this case, I think John went for it a couple times, which in turn powered up Arja and gave him even more cards. But ultimately, it's the kind of thing that you have to deal with as a group at the table and agree to not go into it too much. Arja just really kept finding answers upon answers upon answers, and it was pretty sweet to see. Max's Wildsear deck, unfortunately, was very punished from playing directly after the Esper Sentinel. The reality of it is, 90% of Max's deck would trigger the Esper Sentinel the first time per spell, which, that's what it does. And yeah, he seemed to be struggling a little bit with it. I thought he actually had a pretty swingy turn though, when he had the Rhythm of the Wild out and the Lignify on Elesh Norn. Unfortunately, he just needed a little bit more damage or trample to get some of that extra damage that was blocked through. He could have swung away and stolen the game, I think, if he had that. John's Sliver Overlord deck, it's Slivers. They get so out of hand so fast. There was a lot of debate when Arja was casting Path to Exile on the Gemhide Sliver earlier into the game, but honestly I think it was the right move. There's only Gemhide and like Mana Weft Sliver I think that basically function like that, whereas there's several like haste enabler ones for that Cloudblazer, which was Arja's second choice. John had said that it was probably right to take out the cards that he did when he did, and he was getting very, very close to just kind of dumping his hand and then starting to tutor for other slivers with his commander, had he not. Metya's Doric deck just kind of stumbled. There's not much to say. He was able to cheat out some legendary creatures, which is good, but when you're casting your commander and then immediately using as a chump blocker, it's just, you're not doing what your deck wants to be doing. I'm sorry. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.